Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I made two small stained glass candle holders. Well, I didn't make them all today. It took me a few days to make these. But anyways, that's what I'm talking about today. So I have these metal hoops that I bought on Amazon, and because they are a metal alloy that won't accept solder, you always need to foil metal that will not accept solder. And this is one way I foil things like these metal hoops, is I wrap them the long way with my 7/32 inch favorite black backed copper foil. And so I wrapped it around the inside first, as you can see, and then just kind of burnish it down with this plastic fid that I have. And then I put another row of foil around the outside. So this is one way that you can get the foil to cover your metal object, is go the long way and just kind of wrap them around until it's completely covered. You want to make sure you press it down all the way so that it really, is nice and smooth and is all ready for your soldering. And it doesn't take that long. These particular hoops are 2-inch wide, 2-inch diameter. Another way that you can foil your hoop is to use somewhat short pieces and wrap them around and around and around like I'm doing right now. I like to use a copper foil that sticks really well. So you can use inexpensive copper foils. There's lots of different brands that make copper foils, but you just want to make sure that you use one that sticks well, because I have in the past bought some that were not overly sticky, and then when you start soldering, they tend to just no longer be stuck to your metal. So they look fine to begin with, and you burnish them down, smooth them all over, but then when you're actually soldering to them, the whole thing just kind of falls apart, and then that's just kind of a pain to have pieces of foil just fall off your project. So I usually make a bunch of products, parts to use, because I might change my mind and use more than two. I might want to use 3 or 4 in a project. So I like to have a bunch already foiled so they're all ready to use. So these are the two different ways that I foiled them, and they look pretty similar. Now for a wider project like this can that I'm using for the bottom of my candle holder, I used a wider piece of foil. So this foil was actually 2 inches wide to begin with, which is a little bit too wide. So I cut it in half and then stuck it to the bottom can that I was using for my candle. I'm using this baling pliers that enable you to choose different size diameters, and sometimes even this won't be the exact diameter I want, but it does give you a nice variety. So I made a bunch of wire loops like I showed you. Now I am foiling some 10 millimeter in diameter glass. Actually, they're called stone. That's what they say that this product is. And I foil these, and I actually used the copper foil, and I cut those in 4 long. The width of the copper foil I cut into 4 strips for my glass cabochons that I'm using. Now, whatever you use for your project, you're probably going to want to cover with solder, unless you like the color that the metal starts with, because I'm going to want to patina this. And if I leave it copper colored to begin with and I don't cover it in solder, then the patina will just take to the metals differently. So I like to have everything covered in solder. Now I'm using those wire loopy things that I showed you that I made with my baling tool, and I am soldering in my foiled stone or glass cabochons. Now, when you try to find round stones or glass to use for a project like this, just make sure that they can accept light. They can either be transparent or translucent, but you want to be able to have light go through them, and that's kind of a challenge to find them sometimes. Often they are black back, paper backed to make the color. Instead of being a colored stone or glass, they actually put a colored piece of paper in the back of them, and that's just not going to work for stained glass work. Now I am attaching these to the can that I foiled and soldered at the bottom, and then I'm soldering them to one of the hoops. Now inside this can, I actually took some paper towels and wrapped them up in kind of a coil, and then put some blue silicone sheet, so like a scrap piece of silicone, and I wrapped the paper in that, and that will allow me to have a surface that if I want to pin my stones to or my wires to, I can put pins through the silicone, and also the solder's not going to stick to the silicone, so that I will have a nice surface to work on. And if you fill something with like this bunch of paper towels, it holds that circle shape perfectly, so that you end up with a nice surface to press your product against while you're soldering. Now those are some larger 15 millimeter in diameter glass stones, and they're sometimes sold as flat marbles or dragon tears. There's different names that they are sold by, and they come in a variety of colors. And so for that particular, for the wire loops that I made to hold those glass in, I had to use something larger than that baling tool that I showed you before. I actually used the staff end of a large paintbrush. So whatever you have that's round and will give you the diameter that you want for a frame. Now you don't have to put wire around your glass on a project like this, but the wire helps keep the glass safe and secure. It gives it a nice finished edge when you're done, and it helps support your project. So yeah, I could have just soldered the little glass things on the top there, but as you can imagine, they wouldn't have been very strong. And I mean, they're weak enough even with wire. You're still, I mean, you're dealing with, glass, which of course, is very breakable. So you're still not making a really strong project, but with the solder and the wire, it ends up being pretty sturdy. So these are some of the smaller cabochons. I even sometimes use 8 millimeter. So yeah, sometimes I use the 8 millimeter stones, but the trouble is that, the smaller you go, the harder it's going to be to foil them and to work with them. So it really depends on the size product you're working on. So if your project, is really, really small and delicate, maybe you will want to use the smaller stones. Since this is kind of a small little votive type candle holder, yeah, I can understand why I use some of the smaller stones for it. Right now I have some tinned wire that I use to make some loops for decoration. It's actually 18mm in diameter wire that I use that I coiled up. And the nice thing about having tinned wire is that it's already has solder on it, so it takes patina. And actually, I found that it takes the black patina pretty good, but it doesn't take the copper as well. But if you use copper wire that's not tinned, then you're gonna definitely need to like cover the whole piece of copper with solder, because it just won't look the same once you've added patina to it. As you notice, I put little globs, kind of dropped little balls of solder into the center of each little like coily guy that I made. That was just for decoration. Now, as you saw, I took out that silicone and paper towels, and that was my candle holder when it was done. Now I'm working on the other candle holder, and I'll just quickly show you a couple things that I did for it. So this particular area, I'm using some of these glass globs in this part are flat and some of them are domed. And that's basically because the colors that I'm using, that's what I had that came in those, that size. Some of mine, I wanted a variety of greens and blues, and I just didn't have enough of either all flat or all domed pieces of glass. So I just mixed and matched. So for this particular one, I'm actually attaching one of the macrame hoops to the bottom of the can to start out with. Last time I had a gap at the bottom. I'm not really sure what I ended up liking better, the ones with the gap or not. If you put the wire right on the can or whatever you're using for the base of your candle holder, it does give you a smoother, more exact shape to work off of, but it does use up one of your hoops. So, if you don't have tons of hoops, you might not want to sacrifice one just for the bottom line that's not really seen all that much. Now, another thing that's kind of tricky whenever you're making something that's round like this is trying to figure out if you're going to end up with the right number of round circles to meet at the end. I just was lucky that I could get them to meet. Now you saw what I just did was I used a plastic container that I had, and I used that to make sure that I was having a symmetrically parallel line. For that hoop, I wanted to make sure that it was consistently the same distance from the base as it went around the whole candle. And so I could have used a ruler, anything, but I happened to have that container lid next to me. And it was the right size, so I used that to make sure that I was holding the hoop in the right place. Because that blue silicone that I'm using that's wrapped around the paper towel, because it was pretty snug, once I got the hoop parallel to the other hoops, I didn't have to worry. It wasn't like moving on me, so I didn't have to keep going back and measuring constantly to make sure it was right. Now what I did here was, as you can see, I put these little curlicues kind of in between the two, and I did them going around the circle and then filling in because I wanted to make sure that they were actually holding the distance between the hoops and the glass. So here again, it's very similar to the last one. I just dropped in solder into the middle coil of each of those little coils that I made. I'm using white, not clear, but they're white cabochons for the top rim. And I just used all the same color all the way around the top rim and then solder them in place. So these two candle holders are different lengths, and obviously they're going to look different when they're actually lit. Because that wire that I used was pretty thin, it was a 22 gauge, it cuts pretty easily. Now you could see that I'm using the bright copper. I actually put it in a plastic bag for this project and just kind of swish the patina around to patina these. And then I could use whatever's left in that bag for the next time. And this is my candles. They're lit with a battery operated votive light. And they look kind of pretty. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope that this inspires you like usual. Thank you. Bye-bye.